Hey everyone, hi, welcome or welcome back. Today I am going to be thinking about and answering the question of, do I like the books that the Women's Prize produces, that they choose for their long list, their short list, and their winners? And I guess that's really it. So if you're new here, then hi, I'm Shelly. I love books and reading. I have the books here. You can probably even see one right there. And I love having a place to talk about books and reading, and I love things to be interactive. So I would love to hear your history with the Women's Prize. If you know nothing about the Women's Prize, then you have also come to a good place. I'm going to tell you what it is, my long relationship with it, my long-short relationship with it, and what I'm going to do about this year's contenders. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. The Women's Prize for Fiction has been around since 1996. It started off as the title Orange Prize for Fiction, and it's gone through a couple of name changes, and now we have landed on, in 2023, the Women's Prize for Fiction. And I have the guidelines, as you will, for the prize right here. So it is an annual award awarded to a female author of any nationality for the best original full-length novel written in the English language and published in the UK the previous year. Quite the mouthful, but I love this prize, or I think I do. I like it because it is a beautiful prize supporting female writers and, the English language, and I think that the lists, at least the long lists in the past that I have interacted with closely, primarily 2022, it was very eclectic, it was very diverse, and you kind of didn't know what the Women's Prize was going to pull out of their hat. They sometimes choose a thriller, they sometimes choose something a bit avant-garde, and it was just quite a bit of fun to follow in 2022. And as I was getting my things together for this year, I asked myself the question, do I want to follow the Women's Prize this year? And then I wondered, have I even gotten any great reading experiences out of the Women's Prize, like out of following it? So I did follow the prize heavily last year, and there were some definite misses, like some definite reads that were just not suited to my taste. And then there were some reads that actually worked out pretty well. But what stands out in my mind is that what I think I was telling myself was that the Women's Prize has produced some of the worst reads I read last year. And so what I ended up doing was looking back at all of the Women's Prize shortlists and winners and seeing whether I had read any or I had had any on my shelves. And maybe that will determine whether I will want to follow the prize this year. All right, so are we ready? We're gonna go in chronological order of the prize. And I have books off my shelves. I am gonna insert pictures of the books that I have read that I don't own anymore, or perhaps own a digital copy of. And we're gonna go that way. If you have followed the Women's Prize, if you have any interest in the Women's Prize, will you tell me what your interaction with the prize has been, what kind of reads you've gotten out of it? Has it been worth it to you? Is it worth following? Okay, so we're gonna see. Hopefully I'll be able to make some sort of decision at the end of this video. So starting, and just so you know, I really don't know myself. I don't know where I'm going to land, although I have pulled some books. Okay, we're starting with 1997. In 1997, I have a book on my shelves that I have not read that was shortlisted, and that would be Margaret Atwood's Alias Grace. Now, I have heard amazing things about this book, that it is a historical fiction, beautifully written, tumultuous and perilous saga of a woman who is who is accused, that's the word I was looking for, who is accused of murder. And it is her trial. And there's this thing that Margaret Atwood does. I've not read this yet. From what I know, is that the way the story is told, you don't know if the Grace, I think, perhaps. You don't know if the young lady who was accused is lying or not. If she's lying to everyone and possibly herself, or if she is indeed telling the truth. So I have heard, again, amazing things about this book. And so, it's one that I want to read. It's actually on my list this year to read. In 1999, Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible was shortlisted. I read that last year, and it is a really good book. It is about a family who is from Georgia in the US, and they move as missionaries to the Congo. It tells the story in revolving perspectives from the daughters and the mother. There are 4 daughters and a mother. And you get how life is treating them as they're living in a totally different context in which they are used to. So I liked it. I thought the last quarter of the book wasn't as strong as the first 3 quarters, but it was still a really good book. Moving forward to 2001, we have another book I haven't read, again from the same an author I've already mentioned. It is Margaret Atwood's The Blind Assassin. Now this was shortlisted, it did not win, and I just know that structurally this is a strange one. that's kind of all I know about it. It's like a mystery with a really strange story structure. A book that I'm actually supposed to be reading this month, so I'm going to buy it and read it, is Anne Patchett's Bel Canto, which is the winner of the Women's Prize in 2002. I've heard it's fascinating. It's like the psychology of Stockholm Syndrome. That's all I know. But from what I've heard of Anne Patchett's writing, which I've never read before, but I've always been meaning to get around to, that her writing is gorgeous, beautiful writing, and Bel Canto, can I speak today? Bel Canto is one of Anne Patchett's most popular books. Sticking with 2002, I have another book here that I haven't read. It was shortlisted, and it is Sarah Waters' Fingersmith. Sarah Waters, I have heard, writes in a beautiful Victorian style and she's totally worth the read. I know fans of hers are like mega fans of hers. And yeah, so this is just a reminder to pick this up. Jumping forward to 2006, we have Nicole Krauss's The History of Love, which was longlisted. And I remember, I read this like 10 years ago, and I just remember that it is a bit convoluted. The story was a bit convoluted, and it had a very strange structure. But I do remember it, I just can't speak about it eloquently in the least. Another hop, skip, and a jump to 2010, and we have Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall. It is no secret that I adore this book. I love it so much. It deserves every single accolade it has ever received. One of my favorite books of all time, and it was a finalist back in 2010. Sticking with the Hilary Mantel, we have the 2013 shortlisted Bring Up the Bodies. Again, part of the Wolf Hall trilogy. Well, I was going to say, again, one of my favorites, and it's part of the Wolf Hall trilogy. It's the second book. So good. I think of the trilogy, this is my favorite, though I'd have to reread the whole series in order to really make that decision. Another finalist that I have read, but again, I've read it such a long time ago, and it is Marie Semple's Where'd You Go, Bernadette? It was also shortlisted, and interestingly, I did not like this book. I thought the first 3/4 of the book were pretty good because it's told in letters and emails and documents, just all these unique documents, and you're trying to figure out who Bernadette is and where she went. And I thought it was so brilliant. And then as you got closer to the end of the story, it turned, she abandons from what I remember of this book, she abandons or lessens the mixed media style and writes more in a regular prose. And for me, it lost all of its magic by that point. Moving up 1 year, in 2014, we have Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch, which was a a shortlisted book. Didn't win. It was a Pulitzer Prize winner, so the Pulitzer Prize obviously saw something. It obviously had a huge year if it was shortlisted for the Women's Prize and then won the Pulitzer. I haven't read this. It sits on my shelf unread, and perhaps I will pick it up soon. In 2015, Sarah Waters pops up again with another book that I own and yet have not read, and it is The Paying Guest, which was shortlisted back then. Again, I feel like I feel in my heart that Sarah Waters is an author that I will really love. I just really need to finally get around to picking up one of her books. In 2016, we have one of my favorite books of all time, even though it's the darkest book that I've ever read in my entire life. And it was shortlisted, and it is Hanya Yanagihara's A Little Life. I own this on my Kindle. I've been always like sort of meaning in the back of my mind to get the physical copy, and it tells the story of 4 friends, and it slowly focuses in on one friend and his truly, truly tragic life. It is one of those books that I couldn't stop reading once I started it, and I looked forward to reading it even though I sobbed so much. My camera was giving me a little tood, but that's all right. All as I was talking about A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It's okay. Nothing will get in the way of me and A Little Life, okay? I just really love this book. I love it. It really holds a special place in my heart of one of those books in which, you know, you have to find solace even though there is just such difficulty in the story. I mean, it's just the most brutal story I've ever read in my entire life. In 2018, Elif Batuman was shortlisted for her debut novel, The Idiot. I think this is her debut. Anyways, I read this last year, and I quite liked it. I thought it was really quirky, and quirky in a good way. And it reminded me quite a bit of my own college experience, since I think Batuman and I are similar ages, or at least we remember a time before email and the internet, and then around my college years, the internet really became accessible for the public, and it really made a huge impact on those educational years for me. And in this semi-autobiographical novel, you really get that sense. But yeah, so I liked it, and again, it was a finalist in 2018. In 2019, Pat Barker was shortlisted for her novel, The Silence of the Girls, which is a novel that I liked but didn't love. It is a retelling of the Iliad, and so you have these, at least I did, these familiar characters of Achilles and Agamemnon, and just this really interesting setting, but instead it's through the perspective of the women. And I will say that I think the first half for me was much stronger than the second half, and I do think that Pat Barker has a really interesting style. However, this book didn't completely work for me. Hilary Mantel pops up yet again, and in 2020, she was shortlisted for The Mirror and the Light, again in the same Wolf Hall series in which we were following Thomas Cromwell. I love it so much. Hilary Mantel, may she rest in peace, was one of the greatest authors of my time. Just incredible, and I love this series so much. So I'm really glad to have found that she actually was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for this whole series. Yay! In 2021, there are 2 books that I read from the shortlist and winner. The shortlisted book I read was Ya Jessie. I've heard it pronounced a couple of different ways. But her book Transcendent Kingdom, which was shortlisted, and it tells the story of grief in some ways. It is about a Black woman who is working in academia, and she's trying to understand the way the brain works, and as she's doing that, she's also trying to reconcile the death of her brother and her own mother. And the way it all comes together is just so beautiful. I mean, Ya Jessie, I'm so sorry, I really need to look at this name. But she's just a really concise brilliant writer. And so I really enjoyed that book. And then also in 2021, the winner, which I read, is Susanna Clarke's Piranesi, which is a fantastic fantasy novel that really focuses on setting. There is just this incredible setting. This actually made it to my top 10 contemporary reads of 2021, or 2022. Just a really, really, really great read. We've arrived at 2022, which I read a ton from this list. Longlisted, though not shortlisted, was a book that I really, really enjoyed, and it was Popicio by Leonie Ross, which was a fantasy novel that, for me, really went off the rails in a very humorous way. I really won't say much more because I think it's best as a novel of discovery. Then I also read Elif Shafak's Island of Missing Trees, which was shortlisted. I did not like this novel. It tells the story from the perspective of a fig tree. That's one narrative perspective, and then you get from third person, this Romeo and Juliet-esque story, but like what would happen if Romeo and Juliet ran away and started a new life, and the effects of that decision. It just didn't work for me, to be honest, and the more distance I get from that book, the more I realize how much I didn't like it. And then we also have shortlisted Maggie Shipstead's Great Circle, which was about a pilot. In one timeline, it's about a female pilot at the beginning of the 1900s. And then you have another timeline of a contemporary actress who I found so petulant and annoying. I just wanted to fuss at her and tell her to get herself together because I could not handle her whining anymore. So, suffice to say, that novel was very middling for me. And then we had Lisa Allen Agostini's The Bread the Devil Need, which was again shortlisted. And this tells the story of, I always forget her name. I forget the protagonist's name. It tells the story of a woman who is living in a very abusive relationship. And through the novel, you really get a sense of why she's made the choices that she's made. Now, there is something in writing that tends to really bother me. Did I miss a whole page? In fiction, there are certain things that will really bother me. And one of my personal things, which I won't mention because I don't want to spoil the novel for you all, one of my things that really kind of gets me in the heartstrings, but not in really a good way. It like will keep me up at night because of how much it bothers me, happened in The Bread the Devil Need, which just left a bit of a sour note in my mouth. And then we had Louise Erdrich's The Sentence, which is set in contemporary times, talking about COVID. It's a little bit magical realist. It's a little bit about what it means to start over in your life and to make peace with your past. And it was really good. It was really good. I could definitely see why Erdrich has gotten the praise that she's gotten over her lifetime, because that book was solid. It was just one of those like really solid good reads. And then I have the winner of 2022, which I haven't read, shamefully. And it is Ruth Ozecki's The Book of Form and Emptiness, which won, as I mentioned. And I don't really know what this is about. I have had people explain it to me. I think items talk. They talk to the kid. I don't really know. I'm not really sure. I think it talks about mental health and the system, like the government system that's out there to help support people with mental health and the way that that's broken. I don't really know, but I know I haven't read this. So yeah, now having talked through this whole list, I think that from what I've read of this list, for the most part, books have either been good or really good, like some of my favorite reads of all time, which speaks well for the list, for the Women's Prize, for what they produce. And I'm curious, you know, it's interesting, like I look at the books before me and I'm like, oh, I have good feelings about them, which is this stack here. Like I have really lovely feelings about these books. However, I tend to keep books that I like, and I donate the ones that I don't. So it's like I'm really keeping the books that make me feel good, which is in some ways duping myself into thinking that I like everything the Women's Prize produces. But I think this is what's going to happen. As the time draws nearer, I definitely am going to keep an eye on the Women's Prize and see how I feel about the long list. And if I'm really feeling a sense of wanting to save money, save time, read from my shelves, I have a whole host of Women's Prize winners and nominees sitting here waiting for me. So I can still celebrate the Women's Prize by reading books that I own already on my shelves, and by enjoying what I already own that has already been celebrated by the Women's Prize. And if I'm feeling really inspired by the 2023 long list or short list or winner, then I think I'm going to, this is my strategy, I'm going to look at the library first, and I may even get it out from the library. And from there, we'll see, because there's still this gap from realizing how accessible it is to actually picking up and reading it. Hence why I have a stack of unread books right here. So I think that's my plan going forward. Again, I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. I'm sure I'm going to be coming on and talking to you all about how I feel and giving you my predictions and all of that. And I guess the future is, you know, is hazy, and there is uncertainty out there, but you know, sometimes that gives me a bit of excitement. So yeah, so what is your plan for the Women's Prize? What is your relationship to the Women's Prize? How long have you been following it? Have you found some great reads from it? I want to know all. I want to know all. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. And we'll see you all in my next one. Bye.